Oh, hello everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories on a Sunday, as nature intended. Don't like that picture tonight. It's looking a bit washed out actually. Let's just go down to visual effects. And let's have a look at what's going on with the okay. I don't know what's going on here. Oh, saturation, that's what we want. Yeah, that's better. Saturation. Yeah, that's fine. That's what we're looking for. Just warms the room up a bit. Anyway, good start to the show, isn't it? So, welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories on a Sunday, as nature intended. Here we are in the library, he said grandly. And he's just going to clean his glasses as well because they're a bit mucky. So, we are still reading the excellent, the superb Ghost Stations by the late, great Bruce Barrymore Halpenny. I remember buying that book in Whiteman's Bookshop in Bath back in the late 1980s. And it was a book that I'd heard about but didn't know its title or who wrote it. So to go into Whiteman's Bookshop just opposite the Weir in Bath and find a copy, I was in pig heaven, I can tell you. It's absolutely brilliant. Right, what are we drinking tonight? Two beer strategy, because as you can probably hear, I have come down with a bug and my throat is a little bit scratchy tonight. So we are on the Copperberg Winter Punch Cider, which is very nice. 3.4%, I do declare. Derpy's just come in. 3.4%. You know what this means? I haven't even read a story yet. And already we have a dead soldier. And Run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
I love that film. Right, you're coming up because you're holding everything up. What have you got on your whiskers? Oh, for goodness sake. Anyway, and what are we washing it down with? The Western Gold Honey, which I definitely need tonight. I definitely need some of this tonight. I had some Lemsip about 2 hours ago, but that only does half the job. So, excuse me. Right. The Legless Ghost of RAF Gütersloh. On the airfield at Royal Air Force Gütersloh in Germany, West Germany, some odd things have happened, and as often as not, on Friday the 13th. Early in 1974, there was a large posting of airmen from the UK to Royal Air Force Germany to cope with the new Harrier squadrons to the airfield. And one who was posted to RAF Gütersloh was senior aircraftman Duncan Curry from RAF Kinloss in Scotland. He arrived at RAF Gütersloh in January 1974, and it was very bleak and cold. A bit like a summer in England at the moment. The airfield housed two English Electric Lightning squadrons, 19 and 92. I know that off the top of my head. And it was also F2As as well. And it was also one of the main airfields for troop movements in that part of Germany. The airfield is only 120 kilometers from East Germany. SAC Curry was an MT driver, and his work was mostly refueling aircraft. They were to be ready when the Lightnings were replaced with the Harrier wing. In those early weeks of 1974, there were so many airmen posted to RAF Gütersloh that there was not enough room for everyone to sleep in the normal accommodation. So, they were having to make temporary bed space in attics and other places that hadn't been used for many years. During the confusion for bed space, Curry joined up with a couple of Scottish lads, SAC Mick Schwartz and SAC Maurice Slaven. The three of them found space in an old building in the last block beside a small army building. As they were settling in, they were told that towards the end of the Second World War, some German soldiers had hidden in the cellar of their blocks, but none of them had made it out alive. A few weeks later, the three of them were all having a night in, reading and playing cards. They were just about to turn in for the night when Mick got up to go to the toilet, which was at the end of a short corridor. He left the room and closed the door behind him, which I was sitting beside, said Duncan Curry. Just then there was a high-pitched scream. It sounded more like a woman's scream rather than a man's. Maurice and myself rushed into the corridor, which was in darkness, to find Mick out cold on the floor. When he came round, he burst out crying, and we eventually managed to calm him down and tell us what had happened. At the end of the corridor, there was a locker behind which was a locked door, and Mick said that as he came out of the room, he turned round to see a ghost of a German soldier come through the door. It had no legs and moved in a mist. When the ghost started to come towards him, he passed out. Since the appearance of the ghost German soldier, they heard many unusual noises in the corridor, but neither Duncan Curry nor his two friends ever went to investigate. They found out later that the other side of the door had been bricked up and was sealed off. When they moved out of that haunted building, it was locked up and never used again, whilst SAC Duncan Curry was at RAF Gütersloh. I think that deserves a thunderclap. Oh, I might have to go to Lou and get some tissue paper because my nose is just, as you can hear, it's completely bunged up at the moment. Anyway, cheers me beers. All that Copperberg is. It doesn't taste like cider. It just tastes like kind of blackcurrant juice. Tastes like a very nice Ribena. But anyway, we are going to have a bump tonight because my throat needs it. So slange me bar. Oh, that's better. Guardian Spirit. Bryce and Powell walked slowly from the guard room towards the top hangar on A site at Royal Air Force Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire. It was the 25th of November 1941 and a cold black morning. The airfield had only been open a few years and it first housed number two Flying Training School. It remained a flying training station after the outbreak of war and it housed number 6 Maintenance Unit. This was a 41 group unit housed in the southeast corner of the airfield with a few buildings which included lamella hangars. These hangars were grass covered with no windows and it was to one of these hangars that Bryce and Powell were headed. It was about 7:20 hours by the time they reached the hangar side door, unlocked it and stepped inside. Instantly, both men felt as if they had stepped into another world, and Bryce was aware of a large beam of light, some 4 to 6 feet high, where one would expect absolute blackness. It was uncanny, but there was no feeling of fear. Within about 10 seconds, Powell had found the main switch, only a few yards from the door, and banged it on. Immediately, all the hangar lights came on, and in doing so, the apparition disappeared. Powell called out, "Did you see that ghost?" At that time, Bryce had been looking directly over a Defiant, Bolton Paul Defiant, the tail facing him. Read it again. At that time, Bryce had been looking directly over a Bolton Paul Defiant, the tail facing him for the hangar. Read that again. There should be an extra comma in there. At that time, Bryce had been looking directly over a Bolton Paul Defiant, the tail facing him, for the hangar was full of Defiants, all sprayed black and many with patches over bullet holes. The Bolton Paul Defiant had a single Merlin engine with a crew of 2 and its armament of 4 .30 3-inch guns in a single power-operated turret just behind the pilot. They were used for night fighter patrols and had a maximum speed of 304 miles an hour at 17,000 feet, with a service ceiling of 30,000 feet. Bryce was drawn like a magnet towards the aircraft over which had been the beam of light and, as an electrician by trade, made an immediate investigation to see if anything was switched on inside the aircraft, but found nothing. However, while checking the aircraft, he got a warm feeling of protection, and even when he caught his hand in his hurry to check out the aircraft, he had no cut or felt no pain. He jumped from the wing and stared at the Defiant. The aircraft number was to be forever imprinted in his mind. It was N3312. And later, when he saw the aircraft being towed out of the hangar, he again got that warm feeling of confidence that the aircraft would be safe and protect its crew. Whatever Bryce saw early that November morning in 1941, we shall never know. He was right about that feeling of protection. Defiant N3312 was delivered to the Royal Air Force at number 6 Maintenance Unit on the 6th of November 1940. On the 25th of November 1940, it was allocated to number 255 Squadron, which had just formed at Curtin in Lindsey in Lincolnshire. In the early days, the squadron also operated from Hibblesstow, and there were a great many accidents as the squadron took on a night fighter role with its Defiant. After a few weeks with two non-flying units, Defiant N3312 returned to number 6 Maintenance Unit at Brize Norton, which was when Bryce saw it. It then went to number 256 Squadron, and the 4th of May to number 288 Squadron. It flew many night sorties, and on the 15th of January 1943, it was involved in a slight accident. But the aircraft absorbed the impact and its crew came to no harm. They stepped safely from the crippled aircraft. Defiant N3312 was repaired at number 10 Maintenance Unit, but at some stage in this repair work, it was converted to a target tug configuration and was not reallocated to a unit until the 7th of January 1945, when it went to RAF Worthy Down. It was in store at number 10 Maintenance Unit from February 1944 until allocation to Worthy Down. From Worthy Down, it was returned to number 10 Maintenance Unit on the 16th of April 1945 and was struck off charge on the 14th of November 1945. Its war days over. Defiant N3312 came through the war safely, having done battle in those dark early days of war and protected those who flew her. Had Bryce seen a guardian spirit over N3312 that cold, dark morning in November 1941? I think that deserves that. We're going to have a brief intermission whilst I dash to the loo and get some tissue paper because my nose is completely bunged up. So we'll be back in a few seconds. So hold that thought. See you soon. do apologise. We had to do that. It was torture. Anyway, cheers, me beers. Oh, that's so much better. I had broken sleep last night. It just, when you got a cold and you wake up in the night and you just can't breathe. So I ended up listening to the World Cup at 2:00 in the morning. So no, I wasn't complaining. So slange me var. Just as a footnote to that story, the Bolton Paul Defiant was originally developed as a day fighter. And in one of its first combat missions, did very well. Surprised the Germans, who weren't expecting this aircraft to have a turret on the fuselage behind the cockpit. However, on the second occasion that the Defiant met the Luftwaffe, they were massacred. They really were. And that's when it was relegated to night fighter duties, where it turned out to be very effective. It's almost like I've drawn the Bolton Paul Defiant and I know something about it. Anyway, the 5 Navy men. Having served 9 years in the Royal Air Force, Brian Lee continued in uniform with the ATC. In June 1959, he was at Culham Airfield in Oxfordshire. Culham, a naval airfield known as HMS Hornbill, was a satellite of RAF Abingdon, and it had opened in November 1944 as a centre for naval reservists. The Royal Navy Ferry Pool was also based at Culham with many types of aircraft. The airfield continued after the war with 1832 Squadron flying Supermarine Seafires, North American Harvards and Hawker Sea Furies, and number 1840 Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve Squadron formed at Culham in 1951 with Fairey Firefly aircraft. HMS Hornbill closed to flying in 1953. Culham was then used by the Admiralty as a store, and it housed the permanent staff of No. 1 Parachute Training School, Parachute Regiment, and RAF personnel. They had breakfast at Culham and evening meal when the recruits came back from their day's training at RAF Abingdon, which was under Royal Air Force Transport Command. In the early hours of that particular June morning, Brian Lee was awakened by a violent thunderstorm. He opened his eyes and lay looking at the glow of the old pot-bellied stove reflecting on the roof of the Nissan hut, which was their quarters. As he looked, the glow seemed to get brighter. Then suddenly it struck him as unusual as it was summertime. He turned and sat bolt upright in bed. It was then I saw 5 naval types sitting round a stove, he said. They were definitely Royal Navy, and one was an officer, for he had 2 gold rings on his cuff. There was possibly one other officer type, and he could have been a chief petty officer. They were all in their best uniforms and not in working dress, he said. Also, all were bandaged in one way or another, with bandages on their arms or hands and heads. The officer's face was very boyish looking, and no one had a beard. Brian Lee's first feeling was one of shock, probably at my accent. They had not looked towards him when he sat up in bed. After some 30 seconds, I let out a shout, he said, and as soon as I did, they disappeared. Lee jumped out of bed and rushed towards the stove, waking his mates as he did so. He stood looking at the stove. He stood looking at the old stove. Then I put my hand on it and touched it. It was stone cold, said Brian. For the rest of the night, Brian Lee sat up smoking with his mates. They pulled his leg, but 2 of them later changed billets after refusing to sleep in that particular Nissan hut. I am a fairly level-headed bloke, said Brian. But what the hell were 5 sailors doing here? Sorry, I'm a fairly level-headed bloke, said Brian, but what the hell were 5 sailors doing there? And view from the old guard room at RAF Culham, now only a silent bell for 5 Navy ghosts. There we go. I don't know if you can make out what that picture is. I can't, and it's sat right in front of me. I think we are going to have another nose-blowing session, so we'll be back literally in a couple of seconds. So we'll be back very, very shortly. And run VT. Come on, run VT. Oh, that's better. In the magnificent Rush beer glass, courtesy of viewers Kirsten and Steve in the United States. Cheers, me beers. Oh, that Copperberg is lovely. Slange. Oh, lovely. The Haunted Flight Line. After spending 5 years in the Royal Air Force as an airframe fitter, Peter Hyde got a job with Airworks Services Limited, servicing English Electric Canberras at Royal Air Force Bassingbourn in Cambridgeshire. Bassingbourn was an old World War II airfield, and it opened in March 1938. Vickers Wellington and Armstrong Whitworth Whitley bombers operated from Bassingbourn in the early days of the war. At the end of 1942, the Americans arrived with Boeing B-17s. These were the 91st Bomb Group, and they flew many missions, including raids on Peenemünde and Schweinfurt. After the war, the Americans moved out, and the Royal Air Force returned in June 1945. Post-war, the station housed many units, and in 1950, the Americans returned, and Boeing B-29 Super Fortresses arrived at Bassingbourn, but their stay was short, and they departed in September 1951. The jet age came to the station when Canberra jet bombers arrived in February 1952. Canberras remained at Bassingbourn up until the airfield closed in 1969. Peter Hyde worked on Canberra T4s, B2s and PR3s, the latter whose flight line was the old north side of the runway. The unit was number 231 Operational Conversion Unit. One night in October 1968, Peter Hyde was doing an after-flight AF service after night flying on a Canberra PR3, which was parked on a lonely old World War II dispersal pan. And he asked one of the other fitters in the rear cockpit how long he would be, as he wanted to lock it up, But there was no one there. I realized I hadn't seen him, but I felt him there in some way. I just knew someone was there. I even dropped some banter to him when I was up in the driver's seat, said Peter Hyde. There was an eerie atmosphere on the dispersal pan as Peter Hyde locked up. He then hurried back to the line office with a funny feeling in the back of his neck. About a year later, Peter Hyde was on night flying on the Canberra T4 flight. The PR Canberras, photo reconnaissance by the way, the PR Canberras had long since abandoned this old flight line and moved to the south side of the airfield. The ground crews were chatting in the crew room while the aircraft were flying, and during conversation, someone mentioned that the old PR line was supposed to be the haunt of some ghostly airman. It was the first Peter Hyde had heard of it. It brought back memories of the night he was talking to himself, and he thought he would try to find out more about it. Having nothing better to do, he jumped into the half-ton truck which was outside the office and drove over to the old flight line. The truck had a steel rear body cover, and with headlights full, he drove slowly round the old buildings and pans, looking for anything unusual. Nothing. He came to the last pan and drove slowly round in a circle. He was just going round again when suddenly there were two loud thumps on the tin side of the truck. With that, Peter put his foot hard down on the throttle and raced back to his own end of the airfield. Back at base, and with a bit more sense, he checked the back of the truck to see what had fallen over and banged on the side. That had to be the answer, for he was slowly turning in a circle at the time. But on looking in the back, he found the truck completely empty. Who or what or who had bashed the truck? It couldn't have been anyone having a joke, for Peter drove in a complete circle, his headlights full on, and there was no cover for anyone to hide. Had Peter Hyde found the ghost, and were the two bumps on the truck's side a signal to him, or were they a warning to go away? I don't know what made me go and look, said Peter. I just had this feeling. I often wondered about ghosts, and now I have seen, or rather felt, the presence of one. Definitely deserves a Oh, we're coming up to 29 minutes. We're coming up to half time, folks. I think we might stretch this out to half time. So, slange. I think we'll have a top up of that. In fact, we have just bumped through half time as he tops up the bump. So, what to report today? Well, what I can report today is we're going to have some wasabi mix. So, lovely. Well, what have we been up to today? Well, kind of go back to yesterday. All my troubles seem so far away. No. Photos. So, yesterday, I woke up in one of those moods where I just thought I wanted to sow some seeds and get some planting going, but was also aware of the fact that my preferred potting shed area in the garage needed a bloody good tidy up. So I had a bloody good tidy up. So I cleared the floor. There we are. There is the potting table in the distance, and a load of stuff that I thought I don't need this anymore. It can go to the tip. Cleared it out of the garage. So there we go. There's the potting table. So this is what we got up to yesterday. We planted broad beans, following Carol Klein on Gardener's World. So there we go. I've got a proper area that I can sow seeds again. So the area in the kiln, I'll tell you what, let's go back and actually add the image. There we go. There's the garage. So there's the potting table in the distance. Actually, it's my dad's old woodworking table, which explains why there's a vise on the end. But So that's my potting table. And there we go. That's me sowing broad beans. Absolutely brilliant. So I think we ended up sowing about 18 to 20 in little square tubs. Like I say, I was following what Carol Klein did on Gardener's World. So there we go. So that was that adventure yesterday. Oh, here they are. And here they are now outside, being watered, and again copying what Carol did. She put grit down on top of them, so that's what I did, because I'm nothing if not lacking in imagination, but she's a professional gardener, so oh, the other thing I did yesterday was, this exciting stuff, folks, glad you tuned in. I've got some old garden shears. So I went at them with my sharpening tool. So have a look at that blade edge there, which is all kind of rusty and blunt. Now have a look at it. It's got an edge to it. Absolutely brilliant, that tool. Really, really great fun. So that was that. And oh, that was the other thing I did was, this is fascinating stuff, everybody. My potting compost. It's proper potting compost mix, but I like to sieve it out a bit more. So you end up with this really kind of fibrous material in the sieve. The fibrous material is perfect for bulking out the bottom of pots and things. So that's exactly what we did yesterday. I'm just going to see if I can find any more. No, that's it. Although about midday today, I was trying to, because I didn't get much sleep, and I decided to laze in front of the television and watch old episodes of Gardener's World. Derpy comes in, decides that he needs my attention. So I had to get up and feed him in the end. Anyway, went outside. Here are my Californian poppies. Absolutely beautiful. I've grown these from seed. And yeah. So I think that's about it, really. I can't see there is anything else. Just scrolls back through the images. No, that's it. That's your lot for tonight. So it's been a fairly busy day today. What else was I doing? I sowed some more bits and pieces. Just watering stuff. What did I sow today? Oh no, I pricked out all my pumpkins, sunflowers rather. So I potted them up. So, and where I'd cleared because I was doing a lot of my seed potting in the extension in the kitchen, because we'd now reclaimed the area in the garage. That means that the table in the kitchen extension can now be used to house seedlings away from all those bloody slugs and snails. So that's been my afternoon. And also trying to combat this bloody cold as well. So what did you do on Sunday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories, but instead I watched a confused man from Dudley eating wasabi mix, Lidl wasabi mix. Oh, these are all beautifully short, he said. Suddenly turned to a page which is about 4 pages long. Anyway. The Ghost of Royal Air Force Digby. Digby in Lincolnshire is one of the oldest stations still in use by the Royal Air Force, and over the years there have been many ghostly happenings and sightings of ghostly figures. RAF Digby opened in 1918 as a training depot station, and 2 years later, Number 3 Flying Training School was formed, and the school flew various types of fighter trainer aircraft. At the outbreak of the Second World War, the station housed 3 fighter squadrons, numbers 46, 73, and 504, County of Nottingham. They were joined by the Supermarine Spitfires of number 611 Squadron, and they were all engaged on fighter defence and kipper patrols over the fishing fleet. Throughout 1940 and 1941, there was a great deal of movement of squadrons, and there were many losses. From the 28 pilots of number 402 Royal Canadian Air Force Squadron at Digby in early 1941, 10 were killed, 5 missing, 2 out on medical grounds, and 2 dropped out. On the 17th of May 1941, a tragic loss occurred when Flight Lieutenant C. Hyde was killed over Metheringham, Lincolnshire, while doing aerobatics for a war drive. He was buried at Scopwick Churchyard, where a plot was set up for Canadians. In September 1942, the station became officially Canadian and was renamed Royal Canadian Air Force Digby. Over the next 2 years, numerous fighter squadrons passed through Digby, and from September 1943 to February 1944, a complete Canadian Spitfire wing of 3 squadrons was at the airfield. In May 1945, the station reverted to RAF Digby. After the war, the airfield housed a number of training units, and during this period, it was established that the airfield was haunted. In the 1950s and 1960s, there were many paranormal happenings. On one occasion, 2 airmen on patrol in the vicinity of the control tower were stopped by an officer wheeling a cycle and were asked to fetch the keys to the control tower from the guard room. On returning to the spot with the guard commander, the mystery officer could not be found. Errant comma here. On occasion, 2 airmen on patrol in the vicinity of the control tower, comma, were stopped by an officer. No, shouldn't be a comma there. Anyway, over the years, the phantom officer wheeling a cycle was seen by many airmen, and each time asking for the control tower keys. The control tower itself was haunted, with reports of lights being on when there was no power to the building. Also, voices were heard from within the empty control tower, and on investigation by the patrols, no one was ever found. In the late 1950s, 2 off-duty airmen heard footsteps in their room in the barrack block, but there was no sight of anyone being there. In that same barrack block, an off-duty airman an off-duty airman awoke to see a wartime airman in flying kit walk up to a bed and sit down as if to relax and change clothes. The ghostly airman disappeared when approached. Today, the 2 hangars are empty of aircraft, and the roar of their engines have long ceased. Where they used to take off and land, wireless aerials now sprout from the grass airfields. For RAF Digby is still very much active with a signals unit. The glamour days of the fighter squadrons have long since passed, but Digby has claim to many ghosts. I think that definitely deserves a I think we are going to have another. Goodness me, 45 minutes. So we haven't even started the beer yet. So slow. Well, part deux of tonight's entertainment is the chocolate stout from Aldi. I love this stuff. Dear Aldi, please do not stop stocking this, because it kind of reminds me a bit of Derail Ale, which I used to get from, can't think what the name of the brewery was now. Box Steam Brewery, that was it, until they went out of business. Then I was getting some very fine beers from the brewery in Hewish. They went out of business, so I'm obviously the kiss of death through breweries, but we just need to blow our nose, so we'll be back in a few seconds. Oh, that's better. Oh, the beer burps at 45 minutes and 9 seconds. There we go. Oh, the beer burps again. Ghost pilot frightens 400 RAF men, said the column heading in the Sunday Express. In the 1950s, there were many ghostly happenings at Royal Air Force Lichfield in Staffordshire. The men at the station complained about lights flickering on and off in the control tower and hangar lights that mysteriously switched on with no one in the buildings. Also, police guard dogs would not go near the control tower at night, and when within a 50-yard radius, their hackles would rise and they would not move. One night, all the lights suddenly came on in the control tower, and the orderly officer, orderly sergeant, and the police dog handlers went across together to switch them off. The control tower lay on the southeast side of the airfield, and even in ruins, it has a very chilling atmosphere, even on a fine day. At the time of the alleged sightings, a headless figure in flying kit. Do that again. At the time of the alleged sightings of a headless figure in flying kit, the men at the station said it was the ghost of the pilot of a Vickers Wellington bomber, which crashed on the airfield during the war. The crew was killed and the pilot decapitated. But that was not the true story. In the spring of 1945, Sergeant John Humphreys was a wireless operator / air gunner at Royal Air Force Lichfield, an operational training unit training on Vickers Wellington bombers. While he was there, an air gunner whose Wellington was on the hard standing, running up engines awaiting takeoff, turned his turret onto the beam, opened the door, and walked forward against the slipstream of the propellers and attempted to walk between the propellers and the fuselage. This, of course, was impossible as there were only a few inches clearance. He was decapitated by the aircraft propellers. At the time, there was a great deal of talk about it at the station. It was said that it might have been suicide because the victim had to walk against the slipstream of the Wellington propellers, and there was no reason for him to leave the aircraft, said ex-Sergeant Humphreys. The headless ghost is therefore that of the air gunner from the Wellington, and the phantom flyer seen in flying gear but minus his head was seen many times walking across the airfield to the control tower. The airfield closed in 1958 and was then used for storage and light industry, the runways being used for vehicle testing. The legend of the headless ghost lives on, and other ghostly sightings have been reported. A few years ago, the then manager of British Road Services, who had a depot at the old Lichfield airfield, said they had a dog patrol at night, but there were several places they couldn't get the dogs to go. Even the security men were scared to go near the lonely control tower after dark. One morning, the manager was sitting in his office when he saw an airman in flying gear walk past his window. He jumped up and ran outside to see the airman flyer walking to one of the hangars. He called out to him and followed him, but when he got to the hangar, there was no one there. George, who estimated the incident lasted about 6 minutes, said, "He was a tall man, about 6 foot, and he had his flying helmet in his hand. It was a job to keep the night staff on that haunted airfield. I didn't like it one bit." Definitely deserves a. Wartime hangars at Lichfield. The hangar nearest is where the headless ghost has been seen. There we go. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, I have some fan mail turned up, so let's just read the fan mail. The chocolate stout from Aldi. Chocolate stout, smooth and indulgent, brewed in the UK in partnership with Hall and Woodhouse. A rich, indulgent stout featuring luxurious chocolate flavours balanced by notes of roasted malt. 5%. Lovely. Love it. Absolutely love it. Slange me bar. Ah. Hero lives on at Teesside. A wartime flyer in full flying kit is said to haunt Teesside Airport near Darlington, County Durham. This was the old wartime airfield of Middleton St George, which opened in January 1941 as a bomber station in No. 4 Group Bomber Command. 2 years later, it was handed over to the Canadians, and the main two squadrons were numbers 419 and 428 Royal Canadian Air Force. Both squadrons were flying Handley Page Halifax heavy bombers, and during the early part of 1944, both squadrons converted to Canadian-built Avro Lancasters. Both squadrons took part in the strategic and tactical bombing operations. After the war, they both flew their Lancasters back to Canada. Number 419, Moose Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force, lost 129 aircraft. 310 aircrew were killed, 867 missing, and 187 prisoners of war. It won 195 awards, including the VC won by pilot officer Andrew Minarski. The awards won by 428 Ghost Squadron, nicknamed the Ghost Squadron because of the Death's Head badge and also because of the death and destruction which the squadron carried to the enemy, were 81, and it lost 84 aircraft, from which 63 aircrew were killed and 377 missing. After the war, the Royal Canadian Air Force continued to use the airfield, and it became under fighter command. I think that should be it came under fighter command, and it came under fighter command until it closed in 1964. Middleton St. George was then sold, and the old wartime airfield became Teesside Airport. Many who have seen the Ghost Flyer are convinced that it is the ghost of Pilot Officer Minarski. Tony Norman, a spokesman for Teesside Airport, said, Minarski was the mid-upper gunner who won a posthumous Victoria Cross for trying to release a trapped rear gunner from a doomed bomber. Although it was virtually impossible to clamber down inside the fuselage in full flying gear, Minarski went back to help the trapped man. He was severely burned in the attempt, and the rear gunner signaled him to bail out. Only when his clothing was ablaze did he abandon his effort, saluting his apparently doomed colleague as he fell backwards out of the aircraft. But his parachute was on fire, and he died the next day. Tries to do a Geordie accent, fails. The gunner, Flying Officer Brophy, was thrown clear when the bomber struck the ground. The gunner, Flying Officer Brophy, who was thrown clear when the bomber struck the ground, later told Minarski's story of courage. The Ghost Flyer has been seen many times walking through the old wartime hangars, and is also said to roam the corridors of Teesside Airport Hotel, which was the former officers' mess. Another theory about the Ghost Flyer is that it is supposed to be the pilot of a Lancaster bomber which returned from a raid on the 13th of January 1945, badly shot up and crashed. But the Canadian pilot, J. McMullen, stayed at the controls and steered the doomed bomber away from Darlington. He was at the controls when the bomber crashed into the ground. One stewardess is rumoured to have seen the Ghost Flyer and been frightened out of her wits. Near the site of the crash, locals have named a road after McMullen, who to them was a hero. Whether it is McMullen or Minarski, no one really knows. But there is a phantom that haunts. The hangars. Teesside Airport, the building behind the car park is the Teesside Airport Hotel, the former officers' mess, where the Ghost Flyer is said to roam the corridors. Have we all seen that? Everybody happy? Jolly good, right? Oh goodness me, we're gonna skip that one because that's too girt long. Yeah, we'll miss that one. We'll come back to that on Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. Goodness me. Cheers. In the magnificent United Federation of Planet shot glass, again, courtesy of viewers Kirsten and Steve in the United States. Cheers, me beers. Let's jump ahead to some shorter ones. No, that's not shorter. That's not shorter. Oh, goodness me. None of these stories are bloody shorter. Goodness me, we're almost at the end of the book here. Do you know what? I can't remember where we started in this book. So I might go back to the beginning and we might read some of the earlier ones. Bear with, folks. I'm just looking for, right, yeah, we'll go back and read some of the earlier ones. So I'll need to figure out where we're going with these stories at the moment. So ghostly music. Having spent the day in Cambridge, Helen Bevan and her friend Valerie Sager were hitchhiking back to the Teachers' Training College at Bedford along the main A45 road towards St Neots, without a care in the world. It was June 1952 and it had been a warm, pleasant day. It was very still and they went along the road chatting and pausing, waiting for something to come along, but not being too bothered. They had passed the American War Cemetery and they were engrossed in some gossip when Valerie said, "What's that music?" Helen paused and listened. At first, I didn't hear any music, but then I heard the sound of a distant big band playing String of Pearls. At first, it was hard to tell as it wafted stronger, then gradually fading on the still air, said Helen. It was about 5 p.m., and what puzzled them was where the music was coming from, as they were in quite open countryside and there were no parked cars or lorries or houses which might have had a radio playing. I need another drink. It was hard to tell at first, even the direction the ghostly music was coming from, but then all at once it seemed to focus, and they were both looking over to the spot and noticed some old Nissen huts rather. It was then they realized that they were passing on their left a disused airfield and saw the runways, the distant control tower, and hangars. It was only 7 years since the war. And deserted airfields were 10 a penny in East Anglia, so they hadn't really taken it in. The airfield in question was Bourne, and during the war it had been an operational bomber station. From its runways, Vickers Wellingtons, Short Stirlings, and Avro Lancasters from numbers 797 and 101 squadrons had taken off from these now derelict runways. Number 97, Strait Settlement Squadron, was a Pathfinder squadron, and they took part in all the major raids, including the disastrous Nuremberg raid, when 95 aircraft were shot down. Other raids were Hamburg, Peenemünde, and Berlin many times. But the most disastrous raid for the Bourne bombers was on the night of the 16th and 17th of December 1943. It was the sixth raid on the German capital within a month, and from a force of 492 dispatched, Bourne sent 21 Lancasters. In addition to the 25 bombers shot down over enemy territory, 29 crashed in the United Kingdom with a loss of 131 lives, owing to most airfields being fog-bound. 4 Lancasters from Bourne ran out of fuel and crashed, killing 28 crew. Bourne bombers have been in the thick of it and many never returned. The airfield closed in 1948. We just have a quick swig of the old beer. Cheers, me beard. Helen and Valerie stood spellbound, looking towards the disused airfield. Then, quite suddenly, the music stopped. We then heard men's voices singing and laughing coming from the direction of the empty Nissen huts, said Helen. We could hear them quite plainly. They will never know what it was, for shortly afterwards a car stopped for them, and it was back to dreary old Bedford. I've been to Bedford. Trust me, it's dreary. 32 years later, Helen recalls, my feelings were a little eerie when realizing there was nowhere the music could be coming from. I half wanted to go and investigate, but we seemed to prefer just to listen and see what happened next. It was then I heard the men's voices. I did not feel scared, nor did my friend. I have only the haziest of memories of what happened after hearing the sounds from the airfield. That memory is so strong, it seems to have blotted out the others. That definitely deserves a slange. Oh, I think we have a top up. We do have a top up. And guess what, folks? We have, for the second time tonight, we have another dead soldier. And Run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Oh, I love that film. What did you do on Sunday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories, but instead watched a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head drink ghost stories and read alcohol. I think we'll manage to do it more. And I think that'll be it. We're going downstairs and have some supper and watch some goddamn Family Guy. So, the Missouri Waltz. Derek Harrison was a determined sales engineer working for a company that sold a boiler cleaning and descaling service. Ooh. And he was always pleased to visit Lincolnshire, for he enjoyed the countryside. He was fortunate that his job brought him to Lincolnshire twice a year, spring and autumn. During the October visit of 1978, Derek Harrison stayed at the Limes Hotel in Market Raisin. One evening, he decided not to eat at the hotel, but to drive to a restaurant at nearby Curtin in Lindsay. He had completed his work early and decided to take in the countryside. As it happened, it was to be the most bizarre journey of Derek Harrison's career. After a very pleasant meal, Derek set out for Market Raisin, and it was just after 11 p.m. when he drove along the B1398 road, which passes near the old airfield at Hemswell and does, in fact, form the western boundary. The airfield had begun to take on a derelict state after having been vacated by the Royal Air Force the previous year. RAF Hemswell is a very old airfield dating back to the First World War and was one of the many airfields built on top of the Lincoln Cliff just west of Ermine Street. It closed in 1919, only to reopen in January 1937. In Number 5 Group Bomber Command. At the outbreak of the Second World War, numbers 61 and 144 squadrons were flying twin-engined Handley Page Hampdens from Hemswell. Numbers 300, 301 and 305 squadrons also operated from Hemswell with Vickers Wellington bombers, and they remained until June 1943. The airfield then housed heavy four-engined Avro Lancaster bombers of numbers 150 and 170 squadrons. Between the 11th of November 1944 and April 1945, number 150 Squadron flew 827 operational sorties from Hemswell, and in doing so lost 8 bombers and 40 aircrew. Hemswell was a frontline operational bomber station during the Second World War, and it played a major part in bombing Germany into submission. It remained open after the war and housed many units with a variety of aircraft, which included Supermarine Spitfires, Hawker Hurricanes, de Havilland Mosquitoes, Avro Lincolns, and English Electric Canberra jet bombers. As Derek drove past the old airfield, he found the need to stop the car in order to relieve a call to nature in a convenient hedge. What was seen and heard was no figment of the imagination. Looking across towards the main airfield complex from the roadway, the airfield sloped slightly. Suddenly he heard the sounds of a small dance band. The tune will always stand out in my mind, said Derek. It was the Missouri Waltz. At first, Derek thought that the music was coming from the airfield, but it was all in darkness. Could it be coming from a village hall? But there are very few dense areas of habitation around Hemswell. Perhaps it came from further away. After all, sound does travel at night. It appeared to be coming from the airfield. Then, quite suddenly, the music stopped. I was now rooted to the spot, and my heart raced a little faster, recalls Derek. After a brief pause, he heard the distinct sound of a piston engine aeroplane starting its engines. The run-up of the motors was clearly audible. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from the center of the airfield, followed by a flash of bright lights. Eventually, the sounds of a heavy truck which stopped not far from where I was standing. Although I could hear sounds of voices, laughter, even the crunching of feet, there was nothing actually to see. As the voices drew nearer, I strained into the misty darkness, but again could not discern anything. It was all very eerie, and with the voices ringing in his ears, Derek decided that enough was enough, and he hurried back to the car. Market Raisin was reached in fairly quick time. Normally, he only drinks wine or lager, but on reaching the hotel, Derek asked for a very large Scotch, which was drunk very rapidly. Even the young lady who served him remarked, "Are you feeling well? You're as white as a sheet." "Yes, I must be out of sorts," Derek replied. Yes, I must be out of sorts, Derek replied, but did not elaborate. It should be, but Derek, yes, I must be out of sorts, Derek replied, comma, but did not elaborate. The comma's in the wrong place. For Derek Harrison, it was a long time before the old airfield at Hemswell was ventured near to again, even in daylight. Had Derek Harrison heard a ghost squadron preparing for war? The tune that he heard so clearly, the Missouri Waltz, dates back to the First World War era and was played in military messes in both world wars. It is a sort of "Till We Meet Again" theme. I'm sure that song is called "We'll Meet Again," not "Till We Meet Again." I think, well, this is going to be it, because I was gut hungry What do you reckon, Derps? Yeah, Derpy agrees. He wants to go out the garden, so. Wait your turn. I've got one story to do, Derps, and then you can go out in the garden. So, slow as we go. Oh. The Phantom Party at Odstock Maternity Hospital. Returning wearily from the nursery to the ward after 2 a.m. feed, I envied the younger mothers their agility as they sprang onto their high beds and almost immediately got back to sleep, said Mrs. Russell. Heaving myself up in a most ungraceful fashion, I then lay awake, becoming more and more aware of the singing to a piano that I could hear through my window. It was April 1975, and Mrs. Christine Russell was in Odstock Maternity Hospital, just south of Salisbury. At 36, she was older than most in the maternity hospital and had just moved into the area, having previously lived in Sussex. When, oh, the beer burp's going to do apologise. When Sister came in to check their safe return, Mrs. Russell remarked on the lateness of the doctor's party. Oh, burps again. Sister looked amazed at the statement, and with a sweeping glance at the snoring mother, she asked, "What party?" There was no party. Mrs. Russell replied to the effect that she would like her window closed because the hearty singing was keeping her awake. She denied hearing any singing and was adamant that there was no doctor's party. Sorry, Sister denied hearing any singing and was adamant that there was no doctor's party. To prove her point that she could hear singing, Mrs. Russell got to her knees on the bed and pointed to where the noise was coming from. Outside was pitch black. Both puzzled and agitated, she again said, "Listen, they're singing to a piano over there," and she pointed outside with her finger. Sister stood with her hands clasped and again denied hearing a thing. She pointed out that there was only a store hut to where Mrs. Russell was pointing, and certainly no doctor's party. Christine Russell decided to say no more about it, but for her that was not to be the end of it. For before she left Odstock Hospital, she twice more heard singing, and always at the same time. Each time she reported the singing, but each time was told each time she reported the singing, but each time she was told that there was no party anywhere in the hospital. I heard it so clearly, says Mrs. Russell. The men were singing amongst much laughter and jollity, something like this: "Give me an O, give me a D, give me an S, give me a T, give me an O, give me a C, give me a K," with various seemingly hilarious comments for each letter, and finishing with, "What have we got?" followed by more loud guffaws. As I was new to this area and had no interest in the hospital building other than to get out of it with my gorgeous son as soon as possible, I never inquired about Odstock and hardly mentioned the singing for fear of being thought in need of further treatment. Ages later, someone mentioned in conversation to Mr. Russell, who is ex-Royal Air Force, that Odstock Hospital was used by American airmen during the last war. There have been many Americans just south of Odstock, Stony Cross and Ibsley. Stony Cross and Ibsley had Americans. Been a long day, folks. Stony Cross and Ibsley had Americans, and they were also at Middle Wallop to the northeast of Odstock. Americans with their Republic P-47 Thunderbolts were at Biston, the 371st Fighter Group, Winkton 404th Fighter Group, Christchurch 405th Fighter Group, Beaulieu the 365th Fighter Group, and at Lymington the 50th Fighter Group. The 93rd Bomber Wing of the 8th Air Force, flying Consolidated Liberators, were at Holmesley South. The Americans roughed it. Using mostly tented accommodation. There were many accidents with the P-47 Thunderbolts, with which they flew missions into France to prepare for D-Day and bomber escort duties. Many Thunderbolts crashed on takeoff from their rough wire mesh runways, and many returned badly mauled by the German flak. Many wounded Americans were cared for at Odstock Hospital. Many young Americans died there, miles from home. Had Christine Russell heard their singing from their last place on this earth? Was it the spirits of those young American airmen? Give me an O. Give me a D. Give me an S. I can hear Derps downstairs yowling that he wants to go out the garden. Right. It's time to move on. Oh, your good health. Oh, lovely. Oh. Well, that's it for tonight. Fingers crossed. We'll be back for Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Wednesday. Goodness me, that'll be the middle of the working week, and we're only just starting the working week tomorrow. So, anyway, until then, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why not? Stay safe, stay out of trouble, and please don't have nightmares. Good night.